Good morning, everyone. We'll get underway. Welcome to the Economic Development Committee, 11th November. Just like to start with whakatauki I've been working on, or learning, I should say. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, ki mā kina kina ki uta, ki a mā taratara ki tai. He hi aki ana te a te kura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, te hei Māori ora. And the English version of that is seesaw winds from the west, seesaw winds from the south. Bring calm breezes over the land, bring calm breezes over the sea. And let the red-tipped dawn come with a touch of frost, a sharpened ear, and promise of a glorious day. Behold, we live, and this is economic development. Welcome. Right, we've got partial apologies from Councillor Gallagher.
Just note on council business, if that can be noted. Also, can you note on council business lateness for Councillor McPherson? He is late, but he is on council business at this point.
Thank you. Any other apologies?
Between 1 and 2 today, I'm doing the slot on Free FM, so I guess that also qualifies for council business too. So I'll be absent if the meeting is still underway at that time. Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah, Chair. Council business, but only like about 5 o'clock, and I'm sure the meeting should be done by about midday, 1 o'clock. So,
yeah, we've got it. Fantastic. And we'll go to confirmation of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Ewan. Just noting that at around 10:58 we'll stop, and Mangai Ollie's just going to take us through an Armistice Day acknowledgement, and we'll have a minute of silence just in recognition of that. So we might just stop proceedings depending on where we are, just to honour that. And I'll second. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Any declarations of interest? None. Public forum? None. Confirmation of the open minutes, item 5. Moved Councillor Ewan, seconded Mangai Ollie. Any questions? Any against? Moved unanimously. Welcome to external presenters Mark Morgan and Barry Harris from the airport. We're on item 7. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, again, pleasure to be here again to talk to you about our annual report for the regional airport. Mark, our Chief Executive, has got a shortish presentation to highlight the year, which I'll hand over to him in a moment. Just a couple of opening comments. It's been quite an outstanding and unusual year on a whole range of fronts, as I'm sure you've experienced. Of all the organisations that I'm involved in, the airport was the most affected, having gone from really, really good growth in aviation movements, just refurbished a hotel and was going really well, and then to have COVID come along and have no passengers and no clients in our hotel, it was a cash flow nightmare. You'll see from Mark's presentation that the team have done an outstanding job in terms of responding to that and dealing with it and looking after your investment in the airport. So I won't steal his thunder on that. So, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Mark to run through a few slides, and then we're happy to take any questions about the annual report.
Thanks, Barry. Good morning, Council. So I've just got a shortened presentation. We did present to the Mayor and CEs of our 5 shareholding councils last week, but I have just taken the key elements of that presentation for you here today. So if we could move, thank you. Move to the next slide. So to carry on from Barry's comments, definitely a game of two halves in our year. So leading into March 2020, we were heading for a record year. the group would have delivered a $5 million EBITDA and about a $3 million trading profit. And that would have been the strongest year in recent history for the airport company, certainly as a domestic airport operation, and would have been $1 million up on previous year. However, COVID hit, and of course we had April, May and June. April, as an indication, April 19, we had about 34,000 passengers through the airport. April 20, we had 4. So that was the immediate impact, and of course the hotel followed much the same way. I think the strength of our previous negotiations on landing charges and the fact that we were running 8% ahead on passenger volumes allowed us to, in fact, finish the year slightly ahead of prior year, even though well behind budget. And that April to June period recovered much more strongly than we anticipated, which in fact left the group in a cash flow positive result, which was not what we had thought in our early forecasting in April. Next slide, please. The passenger trends, look again, it just reinforces our earlier comments. We saw our passenger volumes plummet 20%, followed obviously by seat capacity. So very strong, as I say, running at 8% ahead of prior year, which had been consistent with prior years at about 7 or 8%. And then, of course, we hit rock bottom in April. The key point, I think, on that slide is that whilst April was non-existent, May and June started to recover much more strongly than we had forecast, and we'll talk about how that led into the FY21 year in a moment. Into the next slide, please. If we look at a very high level, the financial performance of the group. So the pie chart to the left, I think, is a reassurance for the shareholders that we have been able to diversify the revenue contribution within the group. And you'll see that in particular, the hotel trading represented almost 18% of group revenues in that financial year. So as the hotel started to expand after our 4-star renovation, we had good revenue streams. Of course, we also sadly report we have the wage subsidy as our part of our revenue stream, but that's certainly, that $500,000 in wage subsidy certainly allowed us to retain virtually all people within the group, and in fact, with the hotel re-emerging as a managed isolation facility, it meant that we were able to hold the hotel staff during that period of uncertainty in April and May. But overall, you can see that there is quite now a nice degree of contribution from various revenue aspects. And to the right-hand side, to the profitability, again, I think it's important to note that we were able to deliver a profit even in this, year of perhaps 1 in 100 year events. And the profit was not too dissimilar to profits achieved a couple of years ago in both the aeronautical and the non-aeronautical profit contributions. Next slide, thank you. During this period, we've also continued to invest in the group assets. We will have, and we did invest approximately $10 million in various parts of the group. The airport, we continue to invest in the rescue fire area of the business, a second major upgrade of a fire appliance that in fact arrived back this week, but that was about a $400,000 investment, as well as infrastructure around rescue fire of another $300,000. And in respect of the apron, we completed about $600,000 of apron work. We are quite fortunate that over the next 3 or 4 years in our 10-year asset management plan, the requirement for major asset replacement for the airport is at its lowest ebb. So we've invested significantly, $1 to $2 million in the aeronautical assets over the past 5 years. We're fortunate that that is much lower, less than $1 million over the next 2 or 3 years. The terminal, we of course commenced the Terminal Resilience Project. I'll talk about that a bit further. Well, in fact, I'll deal with it here. We obviously suspended that work as a result of COVID. We were due to let a tender in March for the $15 million redevelopment. That has been put on hold. The terminal meets its earthquake, its MBS rating, but we now have agreed with Air New Zealand that we will look to refurbish the terminal at a point in time where both our passenger volumes are at a level that our landing charges will be able to pay for that terminal redevelopment. And also, of course, subject to the uncertainty of the COVID environment over the next year or two. So our intention at the moment is to start that work in mid-2022 with completion towards the end of 2023. So that is the plan at the moment, but that is quite fluid, and obviously our performance at this point, as you will see, is improving on where we saw even 2 or 3 months ago. But we're best to take a cautious approach at this point. Property, we continue to invest in our property, particularly around our property development work, and I'll talk about some of the positive impacts that's had on our business during this particular period. So if we look at our balance sheet, again, the key points here really is that the asset base has grown over the past 5 or 6 years from 80 million to 130 million. And that's a mixture of investment and rise in value of those assets. But shareholder funds, as you can see, has really continued to move from 60 to over 100 million. And the key point here is that debt levels have not moved significantly, particularly as we have acquired a number of group assets over that period of time. For argument's sake, a $7 or $8 million investment in the hotel. So we've been able to achieve that through either land sales and cash flow through the aeronautical business. So we remain in a very strong state in respect to the balance sheet, which, given the period we've been through, is a very fortunate situation that we are in. We've also have a current debt facility that was approved by the BNZ some months ago. It comes into effect the 1st of December this year, and that lifts our facility to 30 million. We're currently, and that was on the intention of the terminal redevelopment, we currently have debt levels of about 16 million, which will drop back from that period over the next 6 to 12 months. So we have significant headroom to deal with any further outbreak, if you like, of COVID-19 that may in some way, via alert levels, restrain the business again. Next slide, thank you. So look, very high level look at our FY21 initiatives. I think the key point here is that the group continues to focus and invest in the assets, and whilst we're cognizant of COVID, we're not letting that stop our 1-year business plan in this case, and the rewrite of our 3-year plan. A couple of key aspects here. We are looking to invest in our car park. So our licence plate recognition technology is in place, and by early January that will be up and operating. And so Mayor Paula will be able to get you out of the car park via your registration in future. So, but that's a really smart piece of technology that will lead some further development over the next 12 months in terms of airport app technology as well. What I would, though, say that we're also very focused on the Airport Carbon Accreditation Program. We're one of only about 7 airports currently that are undertaking this work. 5 or 6 airports are through level 1. We're just in the middle of level 1, which is really a data collection and measurement this year in order to understand what, and this is airport company carbon emissions, not the wider airport context that does come in under level 2 and level 3 of the program. So we're building a program that's fit for purpose for regional airports, but it is a big piece of work. The other big piece of work right at the moment is our safety management system. This is an entirely new safety requirement by civil aviation, introduced about 2 years ago. Airports have until early next year to be compliant under the safety management system. We, in fact, I've got CAA arriving here with 4 auditors in about an hour, and they're here for the next 2 days auditing the airport. It's been an 18-month project to get to this point, and I think we will have a very successful audit. In essence, it's about predictive management of hazards and risks at an airport rather than relying on lag indicators and then fixing a problem. So quite a different focus in safety management, and a requirement right throughout all airports in New Zealand. And then the other point I'd highlight there really is the property development on our central and southern precinct continues. We have land sales settling over the next month that will inject about 6 million of cash into the group, and that is land that we were able to continue to develop and settle as a result of COVID-19. So again, a good story around the credibility of developing and operating commercial premises in and around the airport. And then finally, the hotel. As you know, it's currently a managed isolation facility. I can advise that the government MB just late last week have confirmed that all 31 managed isolation facilities across New Zealand, their contracts have been extended to 30 April 21, whilst MB grapples with their longer term requirements for border isolation. And I think a desire to start to stage hotels so they've got some options in terms of reducing, although everything we read in the media at the moment would suggest that there isn't enough facility. Obviously we've got a peak period at the moment, but some general sense that a lot more New Zealanders will return to New Zealand over the next 12 to 18 months. So I sense our view is that it will probably stay in place longer than April, whether our particular hotel will. There is a conundrum, both for the board and for the shareholders, that we are a 4-star hotel. It does take a 4-star hotel out of the Waikato region in terms of the tourism recovery. But equally, from a RAO group perspective, it has been a major lifeline to the group over the last 6 months. So that's the dilemma, and we see at this point the property remaining as a managed isolation facility for an extended period. Next slide, thanks. I'll just touch on this very briefly. The point I think here is that Origin Air have commenced operation in October on the Hamilton-Palmerston North route that Air New Zealand did not reinstate as a result of COVID. It's only one schedule a day. It's not an ideal schedule for a business profile, but they've been able to initiate that sector out of their existing resources, so it's made it affordable to launch. I think they should be commended. Anyone that launches a new route at any time is tough, and to do it in a COVID year is even tougher. It's going. What I'd say, it's going okay. It's going well, and the initial passenger loadings Origin are happy with, and we hope to have that at a double daily service by February 21. The other point is that our passenger numbers are recovering much more strongly than we had anticipated. We have our Wellington and Christchurch routes. So October, we were back to 87% of pre-COVID. So compared to October 19, we were back at 87%, which was significantly ahead of our forecast. But again, we remain cautious because we know how quickly the move of Auckland back into alert level 2 and 3 stymied air travel again. So at the moment, it's strong. It's looking very strong for Christmas in New Zealand. In fact, their schedule just out yesterday would indicate they're running their current peak season schedule right through Christmas, New Year. Now, if they do that, that will be the first time they've done that. So they're forecasting quite strong domestic demand through that December-January period. Thank you. Next slide, please. So look, I'm not 3-year. All I really want to reassure the shareholders is that we have a clear 3-year plan that we've just signed off with the board last month. We have, if you like, overlaid the impact of COVID, and we have sort of 8 key areas of focus, most of which I've already talked to you about. But the key point of our 3-year plan is to continue to support the 10-year group strategy and the 10-year property strategy that has, I guess, delivered a very strong, diversified business. And I think the evidence of that has been reflected in the fact that we have withstood this period in a far better shape than perhaps most regional airports that have already been to their shareholders or to their financiers to secure additional funding because they were solely reliant on aeronautical income. So it's been a good news story. The team are clear on what we need to do, and I'm very comfortable that we've got the right alignment for the next 3 years. And then the next slide, only a couple to go. This is just really the earnings outlook over the next 10 years. Again, to give you reassurance as a major shareholder that the 10-year strategy, we are still on track. You can see, in essence, the lower blue bar, or the darker blue at the bottom, is the reoccurring aeronautical income. So I guess this demonstrates that we are still an airport and that the lion's share of our earnings over the 10-year period will still come from our aeronautical business. The mid-grey shade is obviously principally tied to our non-aeronautical income. And then the top blue is land sales. But what I would just want to caution you on is that it appears in the latter part of the 10-year model to be quite a bit of land sold. It's actually less land sold than we're selling now, but it's being sold and envisaged to be sold at a much higher per square metre rate, which obviously means we deliver greater income from it. So you can see we've got a dip in the yellow line and the trend line, and really we fall below our 10-year model for this year and for next year, but then our view is that we will recover strongly, and we should stay ahead of our 10-year model for the balance of that period. So final slide. I hope I'm okay for time, Chair, but look, this just reinforces the importance of our strategic planning that has protected the group over this 12 months and over the next 2 or 3 years as the industry recovers. Chair Barry mentioned the issue that we run an airport and we run a hotel, which are the two industries that have been most affected by COVID. But we've come through it well. I think the business responded very, very well. We quickly took measures to remove all discretionary spending out of the group and to preserve cash, which I think we did extremely well through this period. And now we're seeing a recovery. We are preparing already for the recovery of the hotel post a managed isolation facility, so we know we will need to rebuild that business. But overall, our view is that our balance sheet is robust, our strategy is clear, and we'll just get on and do it. So that's all for me.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for your presentation. Just a question to kick off. In terms of the conversation around Cook Island bubbles and Melbourne, Victoria, are we able to leverage off that directly or augment indirectly some of that potential benefit for the region?
Look, there's a couple of points I would add here is that, and perhaps I can partially answer this question by actually referring to something that I meant to cover off, which was the L3 flight school. So you'd all be aware through media that they're under consultation with their people around the closure of the flight school. And there are two primary reasons. One is the inability to move trainee pilots across the border. And that's been an issue that they have grappled and fought with, and many of the local, regional, both not only shareholding mayors, but other regional mayors, including Mayor Paula, have written to central government. The reason I raise this is that The government is still very tepid on the border, and I don't think that Hamilton Airport at the moment, we're unable to advance any discussions around the trainee pilots. I could not get any clarity from central government on how we could progress that. So I don't think at this point in time that until the government is clear on their border strategy and their bubble strategy, then there could be an opportunity for us to join in that conversation. But it's not a conversation, in my view, that we can lead.
And if I could just add to that, I think, look, there's a lot of uncertainty, huge amount of uncertainty out there at the moment. As I've said before, we're open to any opportunity or proposition for international flights to come into Hamilton Airport. But in the meantime, we're very focused on making sure that we shore up the company and we get through this next period of time.
And perhaps just one final comment. Auckland Airport have done a huge amount of work on the separation of bubbles and in preparation. And Auckland Airport have been they've been co-chairs on the Trans-Tasman and the Pacific kind of bubble discussions with central government, and the terminal has been split. Work has already been done to allow the movement of COVID-free bubbles within Auckland Airport. So my view would be that the government would support the work that has been done to date to allow that to happen.
Thanks. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. It was really good to see the full presentation at the meeting at the airport recently. One question about the hotel, since you've now given us that extra information about it being extended to April the whatever
21.
Given that Field Days is June, right?
Yes.
So that's could potentially be a bit of an issue, couldn't it? Is there any messaging that we can help with to the appropriate minister to maybe, put us as a priority for freeing up? Because we did make the point, quite a hard point actually, that we wouldn't be happy with the fourth facility in Hamilton, given that we're short of beds, unlike more tourist-related towns that have got, lots of empty beds they'd like to fill. So what's your view on that? I mean, I know it's putting money in the pocket of Jet Park at the moment, and that's got to be a good thing. But when do you think we should transition out and start being able to attract events and things?
Well, look, 2 points I would add. One is that we need to remember that the Jet Park Hotel is 63 rooms, so it's not a large facility in terms of being able to accommodate. So it would actually make sense perhaps for one of the larger hotels with rooms to free up over and above ours. The other point I'd make is that Peter Nation, Mystery Creek, are working very, very hard at the moment. I know with Council, with Sean over camper vans. We're talking to them as well about the provision of space on airports. So that they're not necessarily ideal solutions, but the planning, there's strong planning underway to make sure that accommodation can be provided for field days.
Yeah, so I'm mindful now that there's the new government has been re-established to touch base with the new minister and reassert our need to protect our bed space over other centres. Do you think that would be useful? Would you be interested in that conversation?
Yes, and to answer your question, we don't know what the right time will be to move from managed isolation back into the provision of beds. Like all things we do, we have regard for the wider regional impact. We don't just look at it from a straight business and commercial lens. All I can say is we'll review this on a monthly basis in terms of how that's tracking. So if there's any information or conversations, quite happy to be involved in them. We've had this conversation with the owner and management of Jet Park at our board meeting last week, exactly along those lines. How do we know when it's the right time to get out of the managed isolation arrangements?
And I am concerned about field days.
Yeah, look, if I could just add to that, there has been conversation ongoing, but as I've said previously in different meetings with council, it is a bit of a COVID wall to get through because of the health concerns. Peter Nation has been very vocal with central government on all of this, and people are well aware. I have to say I was surprised. I was I was advised that the renewals were going to be through to December next year, before everyone hit town to do that renegotiation. But we just have to keep the message going about what we need to do and not let up, basically. But Mystery Creek has got a number of issues, and to be clear on Mark's point, it is 63 rooms. It's a much bigger issue that Mystery Creek are facing with regard to accommodation.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Barry, Mark. Slightly left field question. Obviously, you guys are, in a period of consolidation with COVID. I have noted that Hawke's Bay is in with a joint venture setting up a solar farm project, and you guys are in the early stages of your carbon accreditation and all that. Is that something that has sort of crossed your radar at all as a long-term, in terms of long-term thinking, or not?
Yes, look, it has. So two answers to that question. Firstly is that under the terminal redevelopment, we did consider providing solar on the roof of the redeveloped terminal. It was going to be exceedingly more expensive given that the existing structure and the strengthening. We have also had conversations with Well Networks, and in fact current conversations, and we've already identified what land we could make available for a solar farm. They're currently working through the commercial rationale around that. Right. So look, we have been talking about, and also Waipa Networks as well at various times. So I think we've been talking about it well before Hawke's Bay. I think there's a bit of promotion going with the Hawke's Bay opportunity with the operator of the facility. So short answer is yes, we'll be looking for other revenue streams if we can make them work.
Okay, thank you.
Mai Ollie.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mark and Barry, for the clear presentation. Just thinking about what's happening with a potential vaccine becoming available. And, it's crystal ball gazing. But what's your thinking on how that would potentially affect the strategic plan going forward?
Look, I think if there is a successful vaccine, it's going to take a while to roll it out. So the impact on, I think for us, primarily it's a positive impact. On the one hand, I could see a potential where some of our domestic travel may evaporate, particularly in the leisure market, because they've got the opportunity now to fly offshore rather than perhaps flying from Hamilton to Wellington to Queenstown to holiday. Conversely, we'll see a much stronger resurgence in the corporate market as well. So I see it as probably benign. I don't think it will have a major detrimental or a major advantage to Hamilton Airport.
If I could just add to that, I think if we've learnt anything from COVID is that nothing's gone on a straight line. There are things that have been hammered and some surprisingly successful businesses as a result of it. So my view is the key for the airport company is to be really nimble and flexible and be able to respond, because I think it's dangerous to try and anticipate it, but we need to be able to respond very quickly. Who knows, post-vaccine, COVID, what's the interest, what are the business opportunities for the airport? I don't know what they are, but the important thing is that we're able to respond really quickly when that happens.
Thank you. Second question is page 39 of the annual report. Under the net surplus deficit before tax, there's a tax expense of 4511 with note 4A. Can you just explain what 4A actually says? What does it mean?
Of course, the Chief Executive will respond to that immediately, Ollie.
Thank you.
And look, and I didn't bring our finance manager with us, but in essence, this is the relief that central government provided around tax relief and claiming back depreciation on buildings, etc. So that's in essence. So it's a one-off adjustment, but it's in response to government's COVID response to tax policy.
Thought as much. The explanation was quite hard to decipher. Thank you.
Yep.
I think that was the answer that I was going to give, Chair.
Councillor Dave.
Always handy when the Chief Executive gives the right answer, isn't it, Barry?
Crucial.
Look, two questions. One relating to the hotel, Jet Park Hotel, following Paula's one. Does the extension of the managed isolation to April, is that going to cause any issues for your medium to long-term sort of corporate market? Are they taking out of play something that would attract flying passengers and mini conferences and things like that? How big an issue perhaps is that?
Look, we rely somewhat here on Jet Park's expertise, and you should be aware their Auckland property is the major quarantine facility, and they've taken out massive conferencing capability as a result. I think the general feel still in New Zealand is that the level of conference activity is only just starting to recover, and it's certainly made some properties have benefited from that. Our fundamental view is that what we're seeing, particularly at the airport, the use of our own conferencing rooms, is that there seems to be quite a bent towards same-day conferencing as opposed to longer conference periods. So look, it's got to have an effect. There's no question that has an effect. But I think for us at the moment, if I was to sort of give you a percentage, we would be doing probably 15% of income without the properties and managed isolation facilities. So that's the huge. There just is not the demand for conferencing at the moment.
It's one of those areas that we will, in terms of reviewing and how we move forward, that's one of the, so how is that demand moving?
And post-April, that you'll be projecting some sort of increase, one would imagine, in that, the need for that.
Well, that's right. And I think if we see a reduction in managed isolation facilities because there's better border control, there's better track and tracing, all the things that the government needs to do, then we will make a very sensible decision around, is it better to rebuild the hotel then back into a corporate market? And I think part of that will be dependent on how the other aspects of the group are performing. Yep. So,
look, the other question I had related to the carbon accreditation issue, different from Jeff's though. I'm looking at your car parking upgrade and the huge sea of cars that are there and the lack of public transport out there. What moves are you strategically looking at in that area? Or I know the regional council has got some long-term sort of drawings, not much more than that.
And every time we've engaged with them or with Waipa around particularly bus transportation, it's met with I think the view at the moment is that there may well be a ring road approach to the airport, so around State Highway 3, State Highway 21. But it is a demand issue for them at the moment. So we're certainly not at the front of advocating for it. We're there to support and we're happy to provide the facilities to allow it to occur. But we're certainly not strongly advocating. We put EV chargers in and the sorts of initiatives that you would expect us to be doing. But I think we have to accept that we are still somewhat remote from the city and from other parts of the region. So getting to the airport is not only people travelling from Hamilton City. Our catchment is Bay of Plenty, Pokeno, right through to Taupo. Do you know what I mean? So it's just one transport link is not going to fix the car parking or the need to drive a vehicle.
Have you ever surveyed where the cars in your park are primarily coming from? Like that's just occurred.
Yeah, we have got. We did a big piece of survey 2 years ago, and I don't. And we will survey again in February, March of next year. We wanted COVID to settle down, so there was no point in doing it this year. But what I can tell you is that and I think I've mentioned this to you previously, our car park has grown disproportionately to our passenger volumes, and through our surveying is telling us that our catchment is growing. So people are coming from further afield to fly from the airport.
Okay.
So it's not a simple
we'll park
solution.
that issue for the future.
Thanks, Councillor Maxine.
Yeah, kia ora and thanks and welcome to our chamber. Thanks for your great report. I'm interested in the wage subsidy and that's ended now as at 1st of September. Can you give us some kind of understanding about the strategies that you've put in place that will review and redeploy staff that you currently have, and have you let any go?
So I think the first point I'd make is that out of approximately, including the hotel staff, out of approximately 80 people employed by the group, we had about two that were retrenched as a result of the impacts of COVID, and that was really the amalgamation of a couple of roles in our retail cafe. Other than that, in my view, the subsidy did exactly what it was designed to do. It bought time for the company to assess the business and the recovery without needing, and the hotel is a great example. We were in the midst with Jet Park of letting go about 30 people because in the first month. That bought us time, and as it turned out, it became a managed isolation facility, and in fact we employed more people. So I think the gem for me is that without it, we would have made much quicker decisions around a restructure, and it gave us that time to really consider the best redeployment of resources.
Thank you. And second question is with regard to the hotel, the staff that are there, the health and safety that the organisation is wrapping around these people in terms of the risk for the passing on the virus, and how you might be managing that.
Well, I think,
Can I just make a point before you answer that, because I know because we're not managing the health and safety, but the managed isolation facility is completely isolated from anything that goes on at the airport. That's the main point I want to get across.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
then health and safety within the managed isolation is managed by MB and Defence, I think.
correct, and Ministry of Health. Yep.
Okay.
But there is no cross. There is no cross, if you like, contamination. Remembering it is a managed isolation facility, so in fact, in the many hundreds we've had through the hotel, there has only been one positive case through Jet Park Hamilton Airport, and of course they're immediately relocated to Auckland. All staff go through their weekly health checks, daily health checks in terms of temperature, and then their weekly nasal swabs. So, and all the requisite PPE gear. And what I can say is that that the Waikato DHB is held in incredibly high esteem by Jet Park compared to their dealings in Auckland. So they've been very impressed with the approach that the DHB has taken here.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Are there any other questions, councillors? The recommendation is essentially up there to receive the report. Do I have a mover? Mayor Paula, seconded Councillor Ewan. Is there any debate? Great. Any against? Carried unanimously. Thanks, Mark, and all the best with your audit today.
Great.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome, Stuart. We'll move to item 8. Waikato Innovation Growth. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Very efficient, been able to do this one after the other. Thank you for that. Just before I hand over to Stuart, our Chief Executive, just to make a few comments regarding the annual report. Just a quick commentary from me in terms of how the year has gone. Starting with, I guess, impact of COVID. All organisations are affected differently, but putting aside difficulties we had with the construction of our new dryer, which Stuart will talk about, and the delays associated with that because of COVID, we have been remarkably insulated from impact of COVID, again, being a food producer. And I think we've seen whilst supply chains had been tested, there was still demand, and there was still product going through the through the dryer. So our predictions for the future, whilst we've got some challenging issues ahead of us, we've had what we believe is a very good year, punctuated primarily by the construction of an additional dryer and the creation of Melody Dairies, of which Food Waikato is a 10% shareholder in, as part of your shareholding, with its drive into sheep milk. There was always going to be an interesting period where we went from our existing dryer D1 and putting the different products through that and having demand that exceeded our capability, and we were in a good position of demand exceeding supply and needing to respond to it. The creation of an additional dryer, obviously, for a period of time, takes some of the production that would be going through D1, and we've got to balance that as we move forward. But overall, demand for new innovations, particularly in sheep milk that's coming through, is really exciting. And my last comment before I hand over, again from a shareholder point of view, and you'll see that in terms of our ability to generate cash surpluses and to pay down debt and increase your shareholder value in Food Waikato over a period of time has been very successful. So with those introductory comments, Stuart, can you add anything to that, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'd talk to the annual report, which is contained within the Waikato Innovation Growth section. And as the Chairman has said, the highlight being the completion on the Melody Dairies dryer, $54 million. That delay of 2 months due to COVID affected Food Waikato in respect of we receive, once the dryer is up and running, a management fee for running it. And that management fee in the region of about 1.2 million obviously was delayed for 2 months and didn't start up to the 1st of July in the new season, rather than 2 months into the actual report we're talking here. And that's really the difference between us achieving our budget and the small loss we effectively had, not getting that revenue because of the delay of the construction. Overall, our performance remained on target in respect of days performed. We were slightly under budget, but there was nothing untoward in that. Everything else came through. The Chairman has said the transfer of the sheep milk industry across to the Melody dryer in the new year will give us a challenge for the new year, so we're expecting to have budgeted in our statement of intent to go backwards in days as a result of that. We see that as relatively short-lived, respect of this year not carrying on to the following year. We have quite a bit of interest. We're looking at future customers who want to grow and innovate. So with that, I'll just hand it over to questions.
Is that it? Wow. I'm just going to let Blair speak. I'm going to get the recommendation and diligent up, and then Blair's just going to speak to it, and then we'll go to questions.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you. Just to add to Chair Barry and Chief Executive Stewart's report, also attached with the papers is the statement of a draft, letter of expectation to the company for the year 2021-2022. And for some of you who may have read this earlier, it has been updated overnight to reflect some last-minute changes to Section 3 in relation to our planned review of our shareholding in NZ Food, but I'll just summarise the letter of intent. Effectively, it follows similar structures in past years, which is really around good engagement practices between shareholder and the company, our expectation that the businesses trade successfully, trade profitably, and our expectation or desire for a dividend, but if there's no dividend, that surplus cash is reinvested into the business to reduce debt. And those are conversations that I've had with both Stuart and Barry on an ongoing basis. I've also signalled in the statement, letter of expectation, our desire to, with Callaghan and with the board, just stand back and look at the direction of the business and obviously our investment in the business and what is the best position going forward for Hamilton City Council, in conjunction with Callaghan, who's the other 30% investor in this business. Councillors will recall, for those councillors on the 2017 council, when we sold our investment in Waikato Innovation Park, we also had our ownership of New Zealand Food, and so that was separated out as part of that restructuring. And at that time, council signalled that it would like to just have a look at the investment in New Zealand Food at the appropriate time, and that could not occur till at the earliest latter 2020 due to a whole range of legal obligations and contractual situations with regards to how New Zealand Food was established. So in my discussions with Barry and Stuart, we've indicated that we'd like to undertake that review process next year, and obviously that review would consider everything around the value proposition, the role of NZ Food, what it contributes to the economy, what its future direction is, but also equally our role as a shareholder and the intentions of Callaghan as the other 30% shareholder. So, and we would want to bring this committee through the journey on that review process, and then obviously any decisions would be made in a very informed manner for us. And so we go into that with a very open mind, but it's appropriate for us to undertake that review because it's a CCI investment of council. So the letter of expectation just sets out some slightly different wording around how that review would be undertaken, and I guess and a key message is that we would agree the review scope with both the board and Callaghan and this committee prior to undertaking any review process.
Chair, if I could just add to that too, thanks, Blair. It's timely because Callaghan itself and MB are going through a pretty fulsome review yet again of the food and beverage space in terms of what their involvement's going to be. So timing is good to get together with them and get an understanding as to what their view is in terms of a long-term hold.
Thank you. And the only other point I'd just like to make, Chair, is that you'll notice in the letter there's just reference to directorships and director rotation policy, and I'm just about to work through a process with Chair Barry, which will then be reported back to the committee here in terms of director rotation, which is due for the company. So, and that again, we'll just through good practice come back through this committee in terms of ultimately any change in directors that Hamilton City Council is entitled to appoint.
Thanks. Just before we go to any questions specifically to the report, is there any questions on the wording? That's up on the board there. Slight change. Tipora.
Thank you, Chair. It was really just a question. I think you've almost covered what I wanted to ask. It was by what date would come back for the director rotations? Not expecting a precise one, but when can we expect? It just says at a committee meeting.
We're still working through with Blair, but what I put on the table is a process that would culminate in there being any resolved adjustments to the board membership by June next year.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll move. Oh, sorry, Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Just mainly to Blair, I think, is just around how extensive this proposed review would be next year. Are you planning that we would do a full valuation of the company and we would potentially be lining up or identifying who the potential purchasers of our shares would be? Is that the intent?
I think we're yet to really scope out exactly the extent of the review, Councillor Rob, but certainly I think there's two parts to it. One is to really understand the value proposition of the business and what it's delivering in an economic sense and a commercial sense in terms of the Hamilton economy, the Waikato economy, and our role as owners in terms of that wider economic story. Then I think the second part is then around potentially what is that commercial value of the business, and bearing in mind that New Zealand Food and the government's investment, it's not a fully commercial entity. So it is established with objectives and I guess obligations with the government that mean it is more around incubation and innovation in growing business as opposed to fully commercialising that. So that will have an impact on value. So I think that is the second part, Councillor Rob. And part of that may well be identifying potential options for council. divest, partially divest, and potentially who could be potential purchasers. But I think, like if I look back to the journey we took with Waikato Innovation Park, we went through sort of a two-stage review process, took council on the journey, and then once we had established what we knew about the business and what its potential value was and the potential paths forward, we then went into that next stage around actually a proper due diligence sale process.
We do, though, have some commercial partners, don't we, in the food and drying options?
Sorry.
Well, haven't we got a limited partnership with some external?
That's the LP.
You mean
taking MB and Callaghan out, we have got some commercial partners who sit in behind Waikato Food or some of the other entities that are linked with this.
Melody, we have a relationship. We're a 10% owner of the second dryer, which is owned 90% by private, by
limited partners,
by commercial companies under a limited partnership structure.
So are they potentially the commercial buyers who might be interested?
I think it's important not to get ahead of ourselves, and I think the important thing is to go back to and reflect again on the purpose of Food Waikato. I would be confident that there's infrastructure there that has value and there would be interest in it. But is that the right objective for Callaghan and for Hamilton City Council in terms of meeting the purpose of the organisation, which is to incubate and create businesses? So I think Blair kind of cycling back on that and just reassessing that and what that would mean versus putting the infrastructure on the market and selling it for food production. That's the sort of stuff I think we need to kick around in this review.
Okay, thank you.
Did you like to second it, Rob?
Yeah, I like to second the motion.
Fantastic. Is there any debate? Is there any against? Carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair.
Very succinct report there, Stuart. Okay, we're going to go to item 6, Chair's report. I'll get the recommendations up on the board if we could, Carmen. So there's 2 additional recommendations. I'll take the report as read. I'll just quickly explain the rationale for some of it. The international relations policy is just simply changing where it sits. It currently sits in the community portfolio, and given the work we're doing with some of the sister city stuff, it makes sense to bring it into under economic development. That's coming up for review soon, so you'll all get a chance to have a look at that. The other ones are relating to the Municipal Endowment Fund, which are just actions that we've already discussed in terms of the group of individuals working around the table to action it, the request to bring in a couple of people to assist us in that process, and then following our briefing yesterday, just to make really explicit that the Municipal Endowment Fund is to sit outside of our debt to revenue calculations. So that's really just to tidy that up. And this is all recommendation which will go to Council on the 26th.
I'll move.
Thanks, Ewan. Deputy Mayor to second. Questions? Porter. Either.
Just on page 28, under the assessment criteria, in the preamble, it talks about viable commercial perspective and then must have a business case to support it. Is there detail needed around what sort of business case? Because we can have all kinds of business cases, a one-page business case, a 5-case business case. And the reason that I'm asking that is then if we come down to, the bottom of that page, nothing's moving, sorry. If we come down to the bottom of the page, can I flip the bottom of the page? Under the project conditions, It then talks about you must consider community, the social well-beings. I wonder if they're not in the, if we don't highlight what sort of business case or the level of business case that is required, then these become an afterthought. Or perhaps a paragraph or so within a business case, but not due consideration given to them.
Perhaps, Chair, if I could respond to that. The thing to remember is that the Municipal Endowment Fund is required to return a profit. So the business case is all important to any investment that it makes because it has to preserve the value of the fund and grow it where it can. The nature of the business case itself will depend on what the actual business proposition may be and the extent of it. The conditions that you refer to, or the project conditions that you refer to at the bottom of that page, they must be met within the business case. So that's why we have those project conditions there, in order for the business case to be guided on the things that it has to meet in order to achieve a threshold for consideration by the committee. So they would be included in that, as a part of that business case.
As a part of the business case.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think I'm looking for some assurance around, depending on what sort of, and I get that the business cases are dependent on the level of project that we are looking at, but that can mean anything from getting a one-pager or a couple of pages to a very detailed. And so within the detail, I'm looking for where cases are made on how whatever investment we make focuses on the social outcomes or
Look, the business case is highly unlikely to be a one-pager. It's quite likely to be quite detailed.
Yeah,
but I guess the purpose of that particular document that you're referring to is to drive what the business case is to cover off. So it actually does have to respond to all of those conditions and considerations that we put in those into that assessment criteria. So the business case must be fully conscious of all that criteria.
Okay. Come on.
Is that okay, Te Pora? Further questions on that? Or?
Yeah, no, there's a statement made that it comes under project conditions and they need to meet that criteria, so, yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions? Maxine.
Related question in terms of the commercial perspective, related to a desire to identify what the risk profile might be, and how might that be agreed and identified in any project?
Look, once again, that's a matter for the business case to put forward, is to assess the risk profile, identify it up front, identify the risk mitigations, but still be fully aware, making sure that people considering the business case are fully aware of the residual risk that does apply, that may occur. So it's a part of any business case, is establishing what the level of risk is, and I've been clear on that and how you're going to mitigate it to the extent that you can mitigate it.
And so in terms of that, it might be agreed that a lower return for some part of that development to meet the other cultural, environmental or social needs could be agreed.
Yes, look, that's right. It's the matter of balance of, I mean, we have a fund here that we want to preserve, we want to make money off it, but we also want the fund to achieve bigger things for the city and for the community, and that is a bit of a message that will be inherent in any business case that comes forward, is what are the intangible benefits, or what are the non-financial benefits, I should say. Having said that, and the council could choose to say, because of that, we accept that we will take a lower rate of return, but the essence of the fund still remains. We must preserve it, and we must give it the ability to grow. And that, so there will always be a trade-off somewhere. I would also stress that we are talking primarily, or most likely about working in partnership with other parties on the fund as well, so that risk mitigation is a big chunk of what we want to do, is have someone to share the risk with us.
And in terms of that, we would also want someone to share the vision
Correct.
that we hold
Absolutely.
as well.
And we do talk about that in those criteria. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Rob?
Thanks, Chair. And through you, I think this question might be best directed to Tracy. I'm just looking at F, which wasn't on my papers. I presume it's a late motion. I'm just not sure whether there's a need for F, given that we currently do that anyway, that we actually reduce from our gross debt cash that we are holding in order to work out our debt to revenue ratio.
So no, we don't. So that was the whole difference between the financial strategy graphs that you see based on this current LTP and the ones that we used to have prior to that, and the ones that you want to have with the next LTP which is what we've been discussing at the briefings. So what this is basically doing is, as yesterday, so you remember yesterday in the briefing I showed you the two graphs. So what this is doing is effectively making that effective as at now. So, for example, when I bring through in the next Finance Committee, depending on when Council approves this, the revenue to debt graphs will look quite different to what you saw last time by the $30 million, because we'll just add that on now to that debt level.
So is that acceptable to LGFA?
Doesn't make any difference to them. This is our own. So we have the LGFA one, but this is our own financial strategy that as councillors we are entitled to change at any time.
Isn't ours aligned to the LGFA though? Didn't we make a change some time back that, you know, there were different measures around in terms of the debt to revenue ratio, and we aligned ours so that when we were talking about whatever our percentage was, it was indeed the same percentage that LGFA would be reading.
So my understanding at the last long-term plan that was one of the reasons why you did it, but again, LGFA do have their own one, but as council you can choose to have whatever you like. And like I said, so the last LTP, you had it this way.
So slightly off centred to this motion. If we're holding cash, don't we and that cash is sitting there waiting to repay a loan that's coming up for repayment? Don't we at that particular time adjust the calculation for our debt to revenue ratio, saying that that amount is ready and waiting to reduce a particular loan that's maturing?
Yes.
So
I don't have this cash.
Aren't we talking about
No, this is a reserve. This is only at the moment. This is purely an accounting entry, just sitting on our balance sheet and the reserves. So either way, I either add it to the debt to revenue or add it to the debt to effectively to basically look like we've already got it, or as soon as I go and borrow the $30 million, it automatically gets included as part of that calculation anyway.
So I'm sorry to labour this point. We've got a sale coming up where we previously agreed that the funds from that sale would go on to term deposit and would show as cash.
Yes.
Now, in that instance, you would deduct that cash from the calculation of debt to revenue ratio when you're doing the report for the Finance Committee?
Probably not now because it's been
Not now,
specifically
but you
used
would
for
take
this.
the other.
I would have.
But you would have taken the other cash off.
Debt, but now because I have to do the accounting for this separately, now I'm not going to be able to.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, I'd like to have a look at this offline because
Sure.
I think we're being quite inconsistent with the way that if we've got cash amounts sitting around, if we're treating.
So the only reason why I have cash amounts or things on term deposits is because it's sitting there ready to repay a loan. That's the only reason why I have cash.
Yep.
So basically I've gone and asked, and I've done it earlier because it's at a better rate to sit at their holding. So as soon as that loan comes in, I can pay that loan off. That's the only reason why I hold cash.
So in your view, that motion is required to allow you to do what the economic Development Committee are seeking to do in terms of reporting the cash that belongs to the endowment fund.
I'll just add a comment before Tracy adds. So after that meeting yesterday, I went to Richard to clarify based on our previous recommendations, and he said what we've said so far is sufficient, but it's a little bit clumsy. And so this, he drafted to tidy up and make it explicit.
Okay.
So I guess from my perspective, it gives this committee a safety net in that sense to say you know, as much as I keep telling everyone that I can get the money, I can borrow the money for whatever you want to do in that respect, that's never going to be an issue. But this just, like as the chair says, just kind of tidies it up and just, it's more of a security and a safety net to say this is actually what it is and we have got this money and it's never going to be an issue.
So you'll report that separately then at future finance meetings?
I will show the difference and what it's done at the next finance committee, and then it will just be part of that graph.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ewan, did you have a question or was it gone? Councillor Dave.
Just following the discussion between, I think, Maxine and Sean before about the purpose of the endowment fund, I just want to clarify something. In the resolution, it talks about the purpose being to achieve council's, or to support achieving council's strategic intent, which I'm happy with, but you also mentioned the word that it's required to make a profit before, which I just wondering how that was probably a loose use of the word, because the term profit is not what's wrong, Ewan? The term profit is not necessarily legally defined in the sense of having to make a certain amount. We're required to get a return, and the return, does that have to be under the Act financial, or can the return be in terms of improved well-being in some areas of council's policy or something like that? I'm just trying to explore that area a little bit, whether we're purely talking about we must get 1% above the market rates or whatever.
No, look, the word profit was used loosely, so you're quite right to suggest that. Look, the reality is the value of the fund needs to be preserved, first and foremost, and then the objective is for the fund to, over time, increase in its value through whatever way it can, which is a profit on whatever. What that level of profit is, though, will vary according to the opportunity and the nature of what's done. But what we're all about here with this fund is trying to leverage other benefits.
Yeah.
So we want to adhere to the purpose of the fund, the requirement that it's preserved, the requirement that it actually is able to grow to the benefit of the ratepayer, but also we want to leverage the hell out of it for other benefits.
Could the growth be in terms of their cap value uplift on land over a period of years? So the balance sheet mightn't show.
Correct. Yeah. And to be honest, and most investments will over time be divested at some stage, and that's when the uplift might be realised in real terms. But no, absolutely. In fact, the bulk of the uplift will happen in terms of the valuation of the property.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Ewan.
I wasn't going to ask this question, but there seems to be this ongoing discussion about nuances regarding the type of return. Sean, does not our current policy clearly stipulate that it requires a market or above market return?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, is that all the questions?
I'm not sure why Ewan's getting so agitated, because I'm actually supporting that policy there, but the issue that could be read, that answer or question particularly, counter to the answer that Sean's just given before, which is that the profit, if you want to use that, or the improvement could be measured over a lengthy period of time and be achieved via value uplift in the property that may never show on your books except as an capital asset.
Okay. Both points are still correct.
Yeah, they're not contrary to each other.
No.
No, thank you.
You're quite right.
Okay, are there any more questions? We'll go to debate. I was actually hoping we'd just move this as a suite rather than separate items, unless someone would particularly like to vote item per item. Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Ewan, seconded by Deputy Mayor. We're going to move it as one suite. Those in favour? Any against? Carried unanimously. Okay, what we might do is, what are we, 10:45? We might have a quick 10-minute break and meet back here in 10 minutes, and we'll lead off with Mangai Oli, and we'll observe a minute of silence. So 10:58, please. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to hand over to Mangai Ollie, who's going to lead us in the next.
Thanks, Chair Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for your indulgence. Today we commemorate Armistice Day. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the armistice between the Allies and Germany took effect, silencing the guns on the Western Front and marking the end of the war to end all wars. 100,444 New Zealand troops and nurses served overseas, which was approximately 10% of our population at that time. 16,697 were killed, 41,317 were wounded, 1,000 more died of their wounds within 5 years of returning home. 507 died while training in New Zealand between 1914 and 1918. It is said that every family in New Zealand was affected in some way, and testimony to this are the many cenotaph memorial gates, rolls of honour in community halls, marae, churches in almost every town, large and small throughout our country. Today we commemorate the end of World War I. We remember those of our ancestors who died overseas, those who are interred in the beautiful Commonwealth war cemeteries, the many battlefields overseas, those whose bodies were never found and whose names are engraved on the many memorials to the missing, and those who returned home with physical and mental scars that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. We also remember their families, particularly those who lost loved ones and were never able to close the grief cycle, not knowing the circumstances of how their loved ones died and never having the opportunity to visit their graves. They shall not grow old as we who are left grow old. Age shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Thanks, Mangai Ollie. Okay, we're going to move to item 9, Civic Financial Services, and Tracy's going to lead us off on this.
Good morning, everyone. So I'll just take this report as read. So just a reminder, this is one of our CCOs that we have mainly around, well, it is just a superannuation. Now it used to be one of our insurance holders as well, but that pit's kind of gone, so it's just involved in our superannuation funds. Their financial year is different to everyone else's, so this is just their half-year report. So their year end is at the end of December, as opposed to end of June like the rest of our other CCOs. So what you're seeing today is just an update on their half-yearly report.
I'll move. Councillor Wilson, any questions? Tracy really wants a question.
No, I really don't.
We'll go to debate. Any against?
Oh, sure.
I can give you a question. It's just with regard to financial literacy for our staff, and what might be offered to them in terms of the benefits of being a party to a superannuation plan.
Great question. So that's part of obviously the induction program that we do with them. So there's definitely, I know myself when I first started, there's a whole lot of stuff that we get given to do KiwiSaver and those sorts of things. But as far as doing anything outside of that, no, we currently don't. But that's a great point. So yeah.
And on that, is there any follow-up if there is no take-up of
Yeah, if I remember rightly, you get a second email basically to say, this is what you've done, you've chosen not to, are you sure that that's what you want to do? So I'd like that secondary opportunity just in case, you know, especially when people are first starting jobs, there's a whole lot of paperwork and things like that. So I definitely know there's a second one to follow up just to check that that is the decision that they're making. So, because I think we actually formally have to say that they're not going to do it. So, yeah.
Oh, good. And well, it'd be good if the financial literacy could be thought about and some strategies put in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were working on sort of our induction program and what that kind of looks like. So I'll definitely pass that on to the team. So thank you. That's a really great point. So.
It's not just the new people coming in, I have to say.
True. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Maxine. All those in favour? Aye. Carried unanimously. Wendy is presenting the next item, item 10, Draft Domain Endowment Fund Policy.
Councillors, this is a tidy up of the split of the Municipal and Domain Endowment Fund Policy. You'll remember back in August we removed the Municipal Endowment Fund from this policy to ensure better management and accountability of that fund and this particular fund. Basically, they both were under two different legislative frameworks which weren't necessarily compatible to allow the best management of either fund. So this is a residual of the old policy, now in a standalone policy of its own. Happy to take any questions.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got a couple of questions. Paragraph 18, the reference to cash held of $8 million plus. I might have partially had this answered in the last part, in the Chair's report. What does a restricted reserve mean?
Actually, Tracy, if I could impose upon you to answer that one. But
so same thing as what you were just talking about before in your previous questioning. So basically what they're are just reserves on our balance sheet, both of them at the moment. So you have a normal reserve or you have a cash-backed reserve. So these two particular funds aren't what we call cash-backed reserves. So basically it's just an accounting entry on our balance sheets.
Okay. So where's the cash currently? It isn't there. That's what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. And that's going to change presumably in terms of the questions that we were sharing in the last matter.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. And second question is, could we use these funds to develop existing Hamilton sites like the current Founders Theatre, upgrading the cafe at Hamilton Gardens, the possible cafe development in Memorial Park, and so forth?
that can be only used, Councillor, it can only be used for a respective reserve.
Reserve land?
Reserve land. So
Yeah.
Gardens.
Well, these are all on reserve land.
Yeah, so Hamilton Gardens, yes. Veranda, yes, it was used to actually establish veranda originally.
Right.
So it's quite specific. The Act is very, very specific. It basically says
So Memorial
towards
Park
purchase.
could be the same because
Yes.
that's a reserve land.
Correct.
What was the other one? Founders Theatre. That's reserve land.
That's correct.
Yeah.
There's several classifications of reserve. Go for all.
All reserve under the Reserves Act 77.
Okay. Thank you. And I just wonder, could the setting out in the policy under paragraph 2 be improved by listing the 3 limiting investment opportunities? It just seems to me, and it may be you've got it correct and I'm just reading it wrong, but you've got under, what was the paragraph that I mentioned? This is hard with these. Hang on. Oh, you've actually done that in the clean copy. Yeah. No. Okay. No question there. No question. It was different. Yeah, it was different in the track copy that I was reading. So you've actually set out, must be used for the following three reserve purposes. So sorry, that question is answered. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Ollie.
When you question the clean copy, page 1, point 5, point 4, talks about priorities that are identified in strategic plans in each 10-year plan. What if there's a priority identified in a strategic or a strategy that has been developed after the 10-year plan has been approved?
I think that has to then go through to committee and they can review the priorities.
So it still can be used to support a priority that hasn't been identified in a 10-year plan.
Subject to committee approval.
Okay, thank you.
Question for Tracy. In terms of what we've just done with the municipal endowment funds, have we been leaning on these funds in a similar sort of not really true to purpose manner?
Yes.
Should we, therefore, all things being parallel, sort of following Rob's questions, look to tidy this up in terms of proper housekeeping?
Yes. No, genuinely, yes, yeah.
So this current recommendation today will not achieve that. It just strictly tidies up the policy.
No, because, yeah, this is just about your policy today, and the previous paper we just talked about the municipal, because now you've just pulled them apart. So you might want to do something different.
So, Chair, I wonder if there's, with your leadership, I wonder if there's an opportunity to break for a few minutes and try to word an amendment that would enable that. Or if you choose, you could do it at another date.
Could I suggest, Chair, that matter be referred back to the working group and come back?
So. Yeah, I like that.
And that will give us a chance to caucus it with staff and so forth, and with Tracy, to make sure that what outcomes we strive to achieve can in fact happen.
Yeah, I like that, rather than making a decision on the fly. Yeah. So with Carmen, if we could, I don't think this has been moved yet. I'm happy to move the current recommendations with that addition that this be referred back to the MEF working party. We'll go through that.
If I could just add to that, Chair, I think consideration would also have to be given as to whether or not this fund sits appropriately within this committee, and given that it's to do with reserves land, and should it perhaps, for example,
such a party pooper, Sean.
Well, community, because it is to do with community land, reserves land.
Good times. All right, it's been moved and seconded.
If we'd just done it today, we could have asked for forgiveness.
Well, the Municipal Endowment Fund can determine its next course of action. Sean may or may not be at that meeting.
So, look, councillors, I really should explain there is two very definitive different funds. They do not work under the same legislative process. Neither are the requirements the same, and this is something that sits more on a community-related situation than a commercial.
Yeah, point well made.
Jumped in. What are the next steps then? So it doesn't sit in this committee, it sits in the community committee. There is, of course, an interplay. What do we do next? What's the next steps?
Well, as per the recommendation, it'll go to the Municipal Endowment Fund and it'll probably get channelled back to the appropriate committee.
Right. Is there a person in the Municipal Endowment Fund working group who represents community? Are you including that?
You're the Deputy Mayor. He represents all of the community. No, there's not a specific committee representative, but I don't think it's necessary at this time because it's just a recommendation to tidy this.
Well, maybe, but maybe it's always useful to have that other half of the decision in the room. It can't be harmful to include someone who is going to lead it through. That's just my view, though.
Could we second Councillor Bunting or something?
To be honest, we're looking at, we could, but I mean, we're basically going to look at the policy, tidy up and push it back to him anyway. So I don't think we need to make it bigger than it is.
one person. Oh, maybe I'm a stickler for portfolio responsibility, so I think if you could include him, it wouldn't be a big hold back, but I'm in the hands of everyone there.
Okay, is there any other questions?
Just for that. Yeah, just for that, for the working group. Sean's agreeing that that might be useful. So.
Yeah, we'll make him aware of it as well and invite Mark along if he wants to.
Have you formulated a membership for that? Or
Yes.
So rather than just inviting him along as if he wants to, can you not add him to the membership?
No, it's not relevant, Mayor Paula, and this is beyond the scope of this. The Municipal Endowment Fund is specific to the Municipal Endowment Fund. We've got a working party established, so
yeah.
we're getting into the detail. Are there any further questions?
Okay, well I'll keep my comments.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, so we'll go to debate. I've moved. Who seconded? Was it? Manga Ollie. Is anyone speaking? Mayor Paula?
Even though they are separate, there is a clear interconnection, and for it to be, I'd rather iron out the wrinkles right at the very beginning than to have any unintended consequences from the working group across the domain endowment policy. So I'd still suggest that an amendment be made to include someone from the community group, unless you're less, Jeff, you're going to take that role and sort it out with Bunty, that he's happy that you take that role, because I really think, I am being fair across portfolios and where people have been involved. I've always taken that view.
Who have we got speaking next? Councillor Rob?
Yeah.
Look, I think this is an ideal example of cross-committee cooperation and discussion. I think if we reflect on how the fund has been used in the past, it has been used as part of economic. If you use the veranda as an example, it has been used in terms of creating economic development on land that is community-owned reserve land. So look, I favour keeping the management of the fund within economic development. It's not a huge fund, but I would favour that cross-caucusing with other committees where there are those opportunities. And we've discussed previously the potential of developing a cafe in Memorial Park. I can't remember the other examples that I had there. We've got Founders Theatre. And so, there may well be some opportunities in the foreseeable future. And certainly in this triennium...
Sorry, guys. Can we have some silence?
In this triennium to get some good outcomes. And I think leveraging the two committees together is much wiser than plonking it into one and leaving that committee to manage the whole thing.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I echo Councillor Pascoe, and I think there's some opportunities for how we use this fund. And I agree with Mayor Paula about I think given that the community services plays such a role with this, it does make sense to me for Councillor Bunting to be involved in that meeting. Whether that's done formally or informally, I don't know. It can probably just be a note, I imagine, rather than an amendment or anything like that, or in addition to the motion. So, yeah, I see some real possibilities here for us, and it would be good to make sure we get it right in terms of agreeing on a strategy. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Maxine.
I just wanted to reiterate the previous three speakers in terms of involving the chair of community, but perhaps not as a permanent position on that committee, but in particular to that item so that they may be able to put their perspective and wonder if there is the need to update that wording to include that particular point as a co-opted member. But I'll be in the hands of the mover and seconder on that.
I'll just finish off by saying 100% agree. I think there's been a bit of confusion. The Municipal Endowment Working Group was set up to discuss issues relating to the Municipal Endowment Fund, and this is a domain policy, which for the very reason we've separated, because these two things have been confused. And all I did was, rather than discuss this in a live meeting, is say, let's take this issue offhand, and it probably needs to sit under community by itself, nothing to do with the municipal endowment, because it's inappropriate. So that's really just a clarification. By taking it offline was just to tidy this accounting piece up and then channel it back to the appropriate committee. So it's actually a totally separate issue. So 100% agree with everyone. I think we're just confusing the portfolios a little bit. But we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Any against? Carried unanimously. Sean, we'll go up to you now. H3, item 11.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I have a few introductory comments, if I may, to the first quarter report for the current financial year for the H3 operation. Effectively, our post-COVID recovery has been extremely strong, or had been extremely strong, up until that August-September period when we experienced this sort of semi-shutdown, and which reminded us how much we are reliant on the Auckland market in particular for the activity that we do, which was in a higher level shutdown than what we were for most of that time. The simple fact, however, is that having come out of that shutdown, or that semi-shutdown, back into level 1, things have actually moved back surprisingly fast, which has been very encouraging for us. Sport has been our big revenue driver, surprisingly, for the quarter. We were surprised at how quickly the events came back, although some of the internationals obviously have been affected. The business event activity drove the volume of what we've been doing. However, it has not come back to the levels that we were enjoying pre-COVID, but there's certainly tracking in the right direction, and we've got a few really good encouraging events that are coming up that are going to give us a real injection. Big conferences, as I say, are coming back, but they're still a little bit behind last year, the levels that we had, and they've been a little bit harder to get. Some of you will be aware we had one large conference that cancelled a couple of days prior to due to starting, but that was not anything to do with COVID. It was more to do with concerns of security threats to the event that had been made at the time by some interesting parties. We still have our staff freeze in place across the board. You'll recall we put a number of measures in place to help normalise our budget during the downtime. We're sort of around 6 or 7, if slightly more, down on our regular establishment, and on top of that we've got a number of unfilled maternity vacancies. So we are remaining lean and mean as much as we can in terms of our personnel costs. Having said that, we are finding it a bit challenging to actually get casual staff that we rely on quite heavily to handle the peak periods that we have coming through. So that is becoming more of an issue for us. We remain very optimistic about the future and where things are going. However, we do have a mindset that shocks like COVID are normal. We're not talking about, oh well, we're just in a post-COVID environment. Basically, the environment is what it is, and it will be what it will be. So we do have to remind ourselves that we have suffered a number of other shocks pre-COVID, not like COVID, but pre-COVID, and that's the world we have to operate in going forward. The contribution, we're around $100,000 ahead of our plan at operating contribution level, and that's the post-COVID budget that we prepared. We would have actually been probably another 100,000 up on that again if we hadn't had that level 1 and level 2 shut down for a brief couple of weeks during the quarter. so that was pretty disappointing for us. However, our October result, which we've just had finalised, we are ahead of plan there. So you'll recall that our budget for this current financial year, as a result of our COVID adjustments or assessment, was $500,000 in the negative against our what would have been our ordinary plan. So we're currently around $150,000, $170,000 towards recouping that $500,000. And I want to assure you that despite having the new budget, our real goal in a financial sense is to actually get ourselves back to a result that matches our original annual plan for the financial year that we're in. So we're working hard on it, and we are seeing some small gains coming through. Following a number of years and where we've had to do an awful lot of work to try and get some outdoor concerts happening for Hamilton, we finally managed to score during the quarter the 660 conference and concert at the Claudelands Oval that will be happening in late February. And that's given us a real shot in the arm in terms of finally getting there. We also have had a breakthrough in a number of other concert discussions that will come our way next year as well. And I want to do a bit of a call out for the fact that a lot of the activity we've got that's really holding firm are the shows. We're having quite a bit more shows in the arena as opposed to conferences. And a lot of hard work has gone into getting that business sort of back for us. I actually want to do it, it's probably a bit unusual, but I do want to do a bit of a shout out to a guy, Gary Taylor, who's on the H3 team, who most of you don't know. He attends shows and events, but he's the guy that stands in the shadows wearing dark clothes and keeps a very, very low profile. But I want to take my hat off to him because he has driven a huge amount of big picture events that are really coming our way and have come back particularly strong for the team. Gary couldn't be with us today. I was hoping to have him in the stalls over there so I could embarrass him because, as I say, he likes to keep a low profile. But this guy has really worked hard to get some of these big events we've got coming. He managed to score the Foodstuffs conference. We're talking about 6,000 people coming up shortly, and a number of the acts that are coming through. And there's that we've got Crowded House that he's finally signed up, and a few others. So he's had a great year. He's had a bad year with COVID, but he's had a great year in terms of getting a few things through. So I hope you don't mind me taking that indulgence to give him a bit of a shout out. And I think at that, if I leave it at that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. But I remain optimistic, but I will also caution we are staying tight to our COVID response business plan.
Mayor Paula.
For the good report. Just a question, because we've known for some time how H3 is struggling in the COVID situation. That's all to be expected. It's quite busy at the Claudelands at the moment with one thing or another. Yeah. Just in terms of the opportunity to capture more of the small events like Christmas parties, New Year functions, things. Is it because at one stage we were thinking of the old grandstand and stuff like that, and being a venue place, and I know it does get used a little bit for those things. How does that sort of business get targeted? I know it's low end, but it's still important.
Actually, the business is going really well. We actually have a lot of Christmas events at Claudelands coming up, basically from the last week of November right through to Christmas. And the grandstand, after we did some work on it around a year ago, has become much more busy. It was a bit of a sore point that we were struggling to utilise it much, but it's actually quite busy. We have a real focus right now on Christmas events, which has been quite strong. And Christmas events are also coming into the Claudelands rooms as well. But weddings are the big thing too. And we've been surprised at the number of weddings we've been able to secure, even multiple weddings that are organised on the same day. So it's a little bit like Vegas, but not quite. That side of it's gone very well. And I guess I was holding myself back when Mark Morgan was responding to a question he had about the small meetings and businesses at Jet Park. We've grabbed some of it. So we've actually picked up some of that, and we've actually picked up a number of small business meetings and events that have come out of the other hotels that are in COVID service. So we've actually benefited from some of that spillage. So I hope that answers your question. But no, we're actually really targeting that market, and I can send you sort of some of the collateral
No, so I'm
marketing.
confident if you say that you're targeting it and getting good results, that's good. Because
Definitely.
you kind of have to go after everything and try and capture them for next time because of the good experience.
Yeah.
Thanks. Is there any other questions?
If you like.
Moved by Mayor Paula. Seconded by Councillor Martin. We're into debate.
Put on record my thanks for the team at H3, who actually, I know how busy they've been because I've had a lot of interconnect with them on various things, notwithstanding the management of our facilities, which is first class, but also for things like the FIFA bid. And the team just pulled together really good quality stuff. If you've seen you will have all seen the FIFA bid video, which was a joined up piece of work from Comms and H3, working hand in hand to achieve that. I think we should be very proud of the quality of information that we try and sell ourselves on. And your team, in terms of running Claudeland's, just top rate. This big event. There's a big event this weekend, isn't there? Dudes are back, and never, even with the big crowds you got to LAB and so on, which was huge. The way the facility is managed is just top rate. You don't, you feel safe, you feel welcome in that space, and then within a very short period of time, any mess that thousands and thousands of people have left behind has gone, and we're back to looking spick and span. So, I know your staff work really, really hard, so please pass on my thanks to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just follow on from Mayor Paula. Sean, just thank you for the work you do there, and please pass on our acknowledgement to Gary Taylor, the work he does and the work you continue to do during these challenging times. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Brings us to our last item in public, which is the General Manager's report. Jen's away on business with Ruakura Development today, so Sean's filling in for her on that. Sean, do you want to lead this off?
Look, I would just invite any questions. Michael's here to respond to any questions on behalf of Jen.
And also we've got Stafford here if anyone wants any questions relating to the second item attached on the growth funding and analytics piece. Councillor Rob.
Yeah, I've just got a question around paragraph 19 where there's a statement made that council is best positioned to lead business and investment efforts for Hamilton. And I'm not, certainly the interaction that I have with entrepreneurs and business people would indicate otherwise, given that council is seen by them as being predominantly a regulator rather than in this field. And I'm just a little bit concerned that that statement might be moving away the leverage that we currently have with groups like Te Waka, Chamber of Commerce, EMA, Hamilton, Waikato Tourism and so forth.
I'll just get Mike Bennett actually to answer. He's filling in for Jen on that.
Yeah, sorry, there's a chair in the way, so I'm leaning so I can see you. Yeah, I think the intent of that statement is more along talking about the relationship with Te Waka. So I think what it's hinting at, perhaps poorly worded by me, so I apologize, is that we're best positioned as council to define and lead what we want. That's not to take away that we support Te Waka, but also more importantly, the leverage of the business community, the chamber and others. So I think it's more of a, we should be defining our own needs and aligning them with Te Waka.
So it's not sending us a message that those other groups are not effective or not, or we're not wanting to partner with them in terms of getting good outcomes.
Yeah, not at all. I think they're integral to what we're doing and we're working hand in hand with them as we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike. And do you want to maybe just touch on the Hamilton Invest piece, which probably sits into that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's touched upon, I think, on item or number 13 through 17. What we're focused on right now and have been just in the recent 2 weeks with a new staff member on board is taking the work that we brought to all of you in briefing as well as our last meeting around the agenda and manifesting that into sort of a why Hamilton marketing material or actual product that we can then be aggressive and pitch. And that will then evolve into, in the new year, a complete rehash of what now is the Hamilton Invest website. But it will not be that for much longer. I think we'll be entering in discussions about what's the best name to use, continue that on or not, and then reinvent pretty much everything about it.
Thanks. Carmen, we'd be able to get the staff recommendations up. Mayor Paul, another question?
The Te Waka's interconnect with this organisation at a governance level and our combined political interface with the new government. Can you shed some light on how we might make improvements? Because I think where we have, and it's good to see, by the way, that you're on the education sector thing. I'm really pleased that we're right in there as well, because that fits with what Neil Quigley has been talking to me about. But in terms of connect with opportunities coming forward, how do we deal with the fact that there still is a bit of residual kind of distrust of work of getting local government involved in what business should do when we have direct conduits to ministers that can often be quite useful? How do we strengthen that? Because I think when it worked well, it worked really well. Look at NZIST. But there are a few more recent examples in which a relationship with the governance end of this city has not been strong, and that has had slightly variable results as well. So how do we do that, do you think?
Yeah, I think a big part of our overall work program is that direct engagement with businesses. So I think was mentioned earlier in relation to the pilot training institution out at the airport. Just one example, but as we continue to, again, reinforce what the committee is targeted with doing, and with Ryan's leadership, we've started a program where any business that's expanding or investing, Urban Homes is a good example, as they've relocated to a new office, being really proactive, writing a letter from the committee, and then I'll hand deliver it to them and then make an introduction and then just start to build that relationship. So where there are issues that we can help them and leverage with central government, they know to come to us, and we can prove to be effective in the way that we have in the past.
And thank you. I support that, and certainly I'll send any businesses that want to settle in Hamilton your way. I have done with one recently. Just want to also ask about, oh, it's gone from my head now. No, hang on, let's go there. No, gone. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Ewan. Yeah, and
oh, here it's back.
can you turn it into a debate?
Yes, okay.
Okay,
So my debate point, do you want me to go first in debate then?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Cove, I'd really like to, this isn't a question, but I'd really like to suggest that we, sooner rather than later, have a joint and collaborative conversation about what coves are coming out of Wellington and which one we can support. The cove for construction has gone somewhere else. That's happened. We weren't involved in that at all. Case in point about could we have added some value had we been involved? Just make that point gently. But we've got Agritechs up in the air. Of course, that wouldn't be a bad fit with us, but then there's other ones coming out around IT and innovation and those kind of things, more of the Silicon Valley type of development. I think we really need to be working very early and very fully on what we want to go after, rather than waiting for government to issue some sort of expression of interest process. And then, I think we can do better than that when we frame it up and we take it to government. And I'm just saying that I am here not to get my fingers in the pie, not to meddle in the kitchen. but I'm certainly here to open up those relationships and conversations with central government. So I'd love in a couple of months, a little bit, or maybe just after Christmas, to understand what our thinking around coves is.
Mike's nodding his head.
That wasn't a question, was it? No.
Thanks.
I agree.
Thanks, Mayor Paul, and agree with what you've said, and also just acknowledge Councillor Ewan's good at giving me a good nudge in terms of some of this economic intel and leadership. And also Stafford, just acknowledge the work you do there on that intel report. It's really helpful and good intel. If there are no further comments, questions, debate, we will go in. It's been moved. Is there any against? Carried unanimously. We're going to move to PX. We'll push through because we're only at 20 past 11. So just give the team a second. Oh, sorry. Anyone want to second me? Maxine, thank you. I'll just give the team a moment and we'll go into PX.